I know we've all heard the age-old advice, sensitivity is just a preference, and you should just choose one and stick to it forever. And if you change it, you'll ruin your aim and your muscle memory. But in this episode of Shottys Yap Session, I'm going to go over how that might not be true, and you're actually holding yourself back, and you might even be causing permanent damage. If you're new here, this is the series where I yap about a topic, and you turn me on in the background while you do something else, or if you really want to, you can watch the mid-gameplay. Let's get right into it. Now, I know a lot of you just want to hear, how is muscle memory a myth? Why should I change my sensitivity? But before I get into that, I just want to get over some basics first. And the first basic is, what is aim? Aim to me is just hand-eye coordination for a video game. You see where your crosshair is, and based on what you're aiming at, you move your arm or your fingers or whatever accordingly. And this makes sense, because a lot of people talk about aim as muscle memory, and you have to do this, and you have to keep it this way, or else. And plenty of people have had horrible experiences with changing their sensitivity, so they've just fully been convinced, I can't mess with it. If I mess with it, it'll ruin me. But with just the way that aim works, I don't think that's possible. Let me explain. When you're aiming, you have your mouse pad, or you have your controller stick, or you have whatever. And if aim is muscle memory, anything changing will completely ruin your aim. If your mouse pad is wet one day, or if your arm is sticky, or if you're sweaty, or if it's humid, and every single thing will completely ruin your aim, and it'll be almost like you're always changing your sensitivity. But while people have natural inconsistencies, most people don't complain about their aim always feeling off, or their muscle memory always being ruined every single day. So why is that? Well, like I said, aim is more hand-eye coordination. And when you're aiming, your body is constantly adapting to what you're doing, trying to change the way you aim based on what's happening. So why every time I change my sensitivity, I feel completely terrible? I can't aim at all, I'm missing everything, and I just feel either really slow or really fast. Well, when you aim, you use different parts of your muscles, and you have different ranges of motion for your aim as well. For example, with a controller stick, you may only use the very center of the controller stick to aim, while with a really slow sensitivity, you may find yourself always on the outer ring of the stick. And the same thing goes for mouse and keyboard. When you're aiming with mouse and keyboard, if you're using a really fast sensitivity, you may not move your aim at all. You may have your hand dead center of your mouse pad the entire time, and you're only using your wrist or your arm. Or you could have a really slow sensitivity, and you only use your arm, and you're always on the edge of the mouse pad. So when you switch to an opposite spectrum, you're using parts of your aim and muscles that you don't normally use, or you're trying to aim the way you did before. And the best way I can describe it is working out. If you're working out and you're doing a bench press, for example, whatever your weakest muscle is what's going to hold you back, because that'll be the first one to give out, and you won't be able to keep going. You might have the world's greatest chest and triceps, but if your rotator cuff sucks or your stability muscles suck, doesn't matter, because you're going to give out before you can actually do anything. And the same thing is with aim. If you only use your wrist to aim, when you switch to a slow sensitivity and try to use your arm, you won't be able to. It's going to be completely underdeveloped, and you're not used to it. But don't worry, that's a good thing. Underdeveloped parts of your aim is just more room to improve. And if you guys don't know, I'm an aim coach. I coach people with their aim, and I help them to get better, and I help them to really transition their aim from aim trainers into real games. But the number one thing I have people do is something that I'm going to talk to you guys about later in this video. But before I can explain it to you, you have to understand why I do what I do. Now, examples of weak points in your aim is, if you use a really fast sensitivity, you've probably never used your arm to aim, and you probably only use specific parts of your mouse pad. So whenever you find yourself in the other parts of your mouse pad, you're terrible. You can't control it, or it feels really uncomfortable. While if you only use slow sensitivity, you might have very shaky aim whenever you go to a fast sensitivity. You might have no control over it because you've never developed your fingertips or your wrists. Now, I keep talking about fast sensitivity, slow sensitivity. What is fast sensitivity, or how do you quantify that? There's something called centimeters per 360. And centimeters per 360 is how many centimeters you have to move in real life to do a full 360 in a video game. And in the description, there's going to be a calculator so you can find yours, and you can convert your sensitivities between any game. There'll also be a video in the description on how to use that calculator. But let's say you already know how to use it, or you already know what your centimeters per 360 is. A general rule I go by is, if you're a newer player and if you're just trying to get into the game, I don't recommend anyone use faster than 27 centimeters per 360. Anything lower is just too fast for most people to control, especially without prior aim training experience. Unfortunately, it's really common that people do it because more people are comfortable with just sitting their mouse in one spot and playing only in that one spot with their wrist and fingertips. And fast sensitivities allow you to do that. And as for slow sensitivity, I don't recommend people go any slower than 70 centimeters per 360. The reason why I go all the way up to 70 is because in most cases, slow sensitivity just makes your aim smoother and easier to control, but you have to adapt by moving your arm more and straining yourself more in real life. While fast sensitivity is much harder to control, It's just a more comfortable position you sit in. So in general, it's easier to perform well on slow sensitivity and harder to perform well on a fast sensitivity. So I recommend most people to go around 40 centimeters per 360 as a starting baseline. And if you don't know what that is, right now I believe it's 0.75 at 1600 DPI on Marvel Rivals. Don't quote me on that, but it's close enough. So you guys can start on that sensitivity if you want to try it out. But then the question comes up, why don't I just use that on every single game, or should I use it on every game? No, you shouldn't. Simply put, you should not have the same sensitivity on every game. But why? I can give you guys a few examples. If you ever played CSGO or Valorant, both of those games are very precision heavy games. The characters don't move very fast. There's not much tracking you have to do. All you have to do is click heads. While a game like Marvel Rivals or Overwatch has characters flying around, jumping around, a lot of vertical movement, a lot of horizontal fast movements, a lot more movement, and a lot more speed in their movements. So for Valorant, you'd be better off to use a very slow sensitivity. And actually the average sensitivity for most pros is in general slower compared to games like Overwatch. And it makes sense because in Overwatch, you have to use a fast sensitivity to keep up with all the movement that people have. But in Valorant, all you have to do is do tiny adjustments to click heads. So sensitivity should be used more as a tool to get whatever goal you have finished. So if my goal is I'm too slow and I want to be able to track people better, I'd make it faster. Or if my goal is I want to hit better headshots and do really tiny adjustments, you want to focus on maybe a slower sensitivity. A lot of it also depends on your playstyle. It's not uncommon for games like Overwatch to have people with different sensitivities for different heroes. For example, Genji or Black Panther. I wouldn't use the same sensitivity on them that I would use on Black Widow or Widowmaker because the playstyles are completely different and the goal I want to achieve is completely different on both of them. Now, enough of that. How can you use your sensitivity to make yourself better? Or what do I give to my students in my coaching? A lot of the students I have them use very different sensitivities as their practice. And you might ask, well, why? What's the point? The point of it is to solve your problems in your aim without having to spend as much time practicing. And I've personally used it even on console as a cheat code to improve my skill faster than everyone else. So how do you do it? The general starting point that I give most people is a 24 centimeters per 360 as a fast sensitivity and a 60 centimeters per 360 as a slow sensitivity. And I have them practice or play their game of choice or do whatever they're trying to improve at on those sensitivities. And if you're on console, I usually just crank my sensitivity a few under the max and then slowly keep cranking it up over time as I get better and control it better. But as for PC, I go to 24 centimeters for high and I go to 60 for slow. And the high sensitivity, what it does is if you've ever tracked something and it looks like you're shaking on them or you're just going past them over and over and over again and you can't seem to keep up or you can't seem to stay on the target, fast sensitivity helps with that. It'll really train your more precise muscles in your wrist and your hand so that you're able to control any sensitivity and really hone in your aim so you'll actually micro adjust before every shot and really focus on what you're trying to aim at. But then you'll ask, so if that does all that, what's the point in slow sensitivity? Well, slow sensitivity, and I mentioned a little bit earlier, most people don't use all of their mouse pad. Most people don't actually use all parts of their aim. Most people choose, maybe I'll just use my wrist and fingers, or maybe I'll just use my arm, or maybe I'll just use my arm and wrist. But not many people use all three together. And using a really slow sensitivity forces you to, because you have to use your arm to make big adjustments, you use your wrist a little bit more to make smaller adjustments, and then those extra tiny micro corrections fast sensitivity will cover, and slow sensitivity will still make you use it. On top of this, it makes you play in parts of your mouse pad that you don't like, so in-game when it happens to you, you won't completely fumble your aim. You'll still be able to control your aim and still perform well. Now, earlier I mentioned how you might be doing permanent damage to yourself, and let me tell you guys a little story first. When I was younger, I used to play a ton. I still play a ton, but now it's more work. But when I would play, I would basically only aim with my wrist because it was comfortable, because it was easy for me. But as I got older, I kept doing it, and I wasn't really into aim training much. I was just kind of playing the game to practice. So I didn't know any better. Now in my life, I have to do wrist workouts, wrist stretches, and I have to do specific training for my wrist because I don't want carpal tunnel. And now my wrist still clicks when I move it certain ways and when I do anything. And it's almost completely ruined certain parts of my aim that I'm slowly trying to fix, but it's a long process. Now when I aim left or right with my wrist, it almost jumps instead of making a straight line. So how do you guys prevent it? In the description, I'm gonna leave you guys a document that I do every single morning now, and it goes over posture stretches, it goes over wrist stretches, and in general, if you do this every day, it only takes about 5-10 minutes. If you do it every day, even if you do it every other day or once every 2 days, it's gonna make a huge difference. My wrist feels way stronger, it feels a lot looser, and if I did it when I was younger, wouldn't have had these problems, you know? Now I know it's a video game, who cares really, but this is actual problems, so you don't want to ruin your life for a hobby, or even if you're trying to go competitive. The best way to stay competitive and keep climbing is not get injured so you can keep practicing. Because if you get injured, you're done. You're out of the game for a week, 2 weeks, 3 months. So it's just like working out. Do the proper warm-ups, do the proper stretches, take care of yourself. Now, one more thing before I let you guys go. People ask me, so if I can just change it whenever, is there a time where I shouldn't change it? Yes. I can't tell you how many times I've missed a shot. I was like, you know what? Let me change my sense. I'll change it 5, 15, 23 times. And it's just counterproductive. It doesn't get anything done. Now, I said, oh, well, sensitivity doesn't matter and it's just a tool. So what's wrong with that? You're right. What's wrong with it is the idea behind it. Instead of using your sensitivity as a tool, you're stressing and thinking about, it doesn't feel good. It feels off. It doesn't feel right. And it takes your mind off the game and actually playing right compared to just letting it do its thing. And one other thing, now this is secret game for people who actually watch this far. The idea of changing your sensitivity is something I used to abuse when I played video games. And I've heard very few people, especially in the Marvel Rivals community, talk about it. With your aim, you can almost force yourself to focus. Let me run you through a scenario. Have you ever been playing and you kept over flicking? So you change your sensitivity to something slower, and then you stop over flicking, but then a week later, you're over flicking again. So you lower it again. And this goes on for all of eternity. What if I told you it's not actually your sensitivity? And I'm going to make a full video on this or make this its own video, but this is just something bonus for everyone who actually watched this far. But it's not your sensitivity. It's you. You're autopiloting. You're not paying attention and you're just saying, let me go through the motions, and playing. You're not thinking about anything. And that's the problem. That right there is exactly why you can't improve. That right there is exactly why your aim feels off. Because you're just passively aiming. You're letting yourself just, whatever. If it hits, it hits. If it doesn't, oh well. So I used to take advantage of this. On console and PC, before I would get on a game, I would go do a free-for-all or rumble or whatever game mode is called for you, a deathmatch. And when I did it, I would change my sensitivity. I'd usually make it something really crazy, like super fast or super slow or something, and I would change it. Then, after warming up a little bit, I would go into a real game with my normal sensitivity, and I would aim way better. Now, you might not aim better right away because the sensitivity you main actually isn't the right sensitivity for you. It's just a sensitivity you stuck on. But when you find a sensitivity that's actually comfortable for you, this works wonders. For example, my comfortable sensitivity is 40 centimeters per 360. It's basically the sensitivity I've went to on every single game without even knowing. The first sensitivity I played on this game was 40 cm. I didn't even know it was 40 cm. I just went to what felt right and kept going. But almost every game, that's what I've defaulted to. So it's my comfortable sensitivity. But my comfortable sensitivity can still feel off if I'm autopiloting. So I try to always do that. And when I get in real games, then I'm actually actively aiming instead of passively aiming. Anyways, my next video will probably be more on that. So in the meantime, while you wait for it, why don't you check out this video of 34 minutes of brutally honest advice. Have a good one, everyone. God bless you.